I hope that you're enjoying reading 1st and 2nd Kings. I mean, I say that sort of, you said you were reading through Samuel, but you folks that are reading through 1st and 2nd Kings, you know how hard the reading is. The condition of God's people is in a shambles, and what keeps being repeated is you got a certain kind of king. Actually, the most repeated part is such and such a king is evil. He does evil in the sight of the Lord, and then the results are bad. And you're reading that over and over again. And of course, I've asked myself the same thing, maybe as you have. Why does God repeat this so much? I want to help you at least a little bit to think through this large piece of data in 1st and 2nd Kings, and it'll continue in Chronicles too. But first of all, remember that you're seeing an actual record of history. So it's selective history, but you've got God showing how He's redeeming His people in the midst of real history, which happened to include a line of kings that were evil. So it's real. It was real history. So it's not like He could do something else. That's what He's working with. But what I wanted to just have you think about for a moment is when you're reading through all these kings, ask yourself, what does the first reader of this material get from this narrative? The very first reader. So not that long removed from the actual characters, you've got God's people now in exile. More than likely they're in exile at this time, so it's after the demise of their kingdom. When they read this for the very first time that it's in print, what do they get from this? And here's what I think they get. When you're reading through all this description of, mostly evil kings, but then there's a few good kings in there, sort of sprinkling. Hezekiah, for instance, we just read either today or yesterday. In 2 Kings 18 to chapters 21, you've got somebody like Hezekiah who's really a good king. But here's the long list of evil kings, and the first readers see that list and they think, our living conditions were horrible whenever an evil king was in power. I mean, when supposedly the kings that were supposed to be fighting for us, when they turned away from the Lord and did evil themselves, we were in a shambles. So the first readers are reading this list of bad kings and then a few good kings, and what they're thinking is, wow, the condition of my king actually determines my quality of life. And that's I think that's really a huge part of the theology that you're reading. So 1st and 2nd Kings, as you read the list of these characters, most of them evil, a few of them good, what you're seeing is you're seeing the condition of God's people being affected by their leadership, their king. So when the godly king's in power, the nation flourishes. When the evil king's in power, the nation is destroyed. And it's all pointing, of course, to the question, who's running our lives, who's actually in control of our lives. But let me give you just one example before we go. In 2 Kings 21:9, the people, it says, but they did not listen. And Manasseh, who was the evil king, led them astray to do more evil than the nations had done, whom the Lord destroyed before the people of Israel. So here you've got an evil king causing God's people to do more evil than even the pagan nations had done prior to their coming into the land. So it's a frightening example of what the wrong kind of king can do in a life, and I'm convinced that part of the theology of this section is, when you're reading about all these kings, just simply ask yourself, how does your king affect your life? If King Jesus is controlling our lives, we have victory upon spiritual blessing upon spiritual blessing. Anytime we revert back to another rule, we only have one alternative kingdom. It's the kingdom of darkness, according to Colossians 1, and that kingdom is what actually destroys the quality of our lives.